But on tonight. So I want to welcome everybody to tonight's live. And let me make sure. Really appreciate you guys hopping on. I live here in Phoenix, Arizona. I love living here. And I love nothing more than helping people. And that's why I do what I do. Eddie Lopez, how are you doing? And so I'm excited to get on tonight. You know, we're talking about a major health issue affecting 93% of us. It's called insulin resistance. And before we get started, I want to know where you guys are located. So if you wouldn't mind, drop your location in the chat. Again, I'm always curious where people are tuning in from around the world. And so, folks, if you're struggling with your health right now, this information could change your life. And if you know somebody who needs to hear this, feel free to share this live with them so that they can hop on, they can listen, they can ask questions. And Virginia, we got Virginia in the house. Awesome. As you guys tune in, let me know where you're located. I'm always curious where people are connected around the world. And I'm really excited to get on because, you know, I wish that somebody would have shared this with me when I was younger. You know, my dad passed away on Easter Sunday 2017, and you know, he passed away from something that, in my opinion, could have been prevented. And I had a brother that was 33 years old that passed away, and so and so I love sharing this because I know first and foremost that this can make an impact in people's lives. Okay, so if you know somebody who needs to hear this, share the live with them so that they can jump in, listen, they can ask questions too. Okay. Solomon said in the Bible, in all you're gaining, gain understanding. And let me tell you, when you understand insulin resistance, it changes everything. Okay. You know, many of us actually don't realize that we have insulin resistance. And most people don't realize that insulin resistance is at the root of so many health issues like PCOS, infertility, high blood pressure, even non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Most people are affected by this and they don't know. So, and here's the deal, folks. If you want to make a big impact in business or in life, you need to be able to solve a major problem. And right now, one of the biggest health issues in the world is insulin resistance. Now, how many of you have ever heard that term? If you've ever heard insulin resistance, put IR in the chat. Okay, it helps me to know how many people have heard of this. Okay, how many of you know that you are either diabetic or pre-diabetic? I'm curious. And Mindy, thank you so much for the follow. Okay, but right now, insulin resistance happens to be the biggest health issue, and what I'm going to share with you is going to help you to understand, number one, what's causing it, and most importantly, what we can do about it. Okay. And for the folks that are hopping on, if you've never heard of insulin resistance before, I encourage you to Google it and research it because this is going to be a hot health topic for years to come. Okay. So thank you folks for being on this live. Now, let me ask you a real question. Okay. Why is diabetes, obesity, heart disease, fatty liver, why are these things exploding today when our grandparents actually did not deal with this at the same rate that we are? Let me ask you guys this question, okay? Do you think that we spend more money on healthcare or less than we did before? What do you guys think? If you wouldn't mind, drop that in the chat. Do you think we spend more money on healthcare than ever before, or do you think we spend less? Cindy, thank you for that. Shane Palmer, right? You said lot more, right? Cindy says more now. It's crazy to think that, we take more medications than ever. And I want you guys to understand something, right? Chronic diseases, autoimmune conditions, they continue to skyrocket out of control. And I want you guys to understand that it is a metabolic condition, right? It's insulin resistance. Now, there's a couple books that I really love to share with you guys. These are two of my favorite. Okay, I'm going to put this one down. But we've got Dr. Robert Lustig, who wrote Metabolical, okay? And he's a nutrition genius, okay? This guy went to MIT, he's got a medical degree from Cornell, but he's got a law degree. And Shane Palmer, thank you for the follow, okay? What about why we get sick, right? Dr. Benjamin Bickman, right? Dr. Benjamin Bickman is the leading scientist expert in the world when it comes to insulin resistance, right? And he helps us to understand what is kind of driving all of these health issues. So he wrote Why We Get Sick, okay? Now, Dr. Robert Lustig, Dr. Jason Fung, Dr. Mindy Pels, Dr. Jamie Seaman, Dr. Ben Bickman, Dr. Robert Lustig. See, these are all different doctors. They're different authors, but they come to the same conclusion, right? That insulin resistance happens to be the root cause of a lot of chronic diseases. And Cindy, right? I do think that potentially it could play a role, right? But I want you guys to understand something about insulin resistance, okay? When you become insulin resistant, it means that your cells, right, our whole body, head to toe, is made up of trillions of cells. Let me just make sure. And so our whole body is made up of trillions of cells, right? And when you become insulin resistant, it means that your cells stop responding to insulin properly. Cindy, thank you for the follow. What happens is that your sugar stays high, right? And your insulin stays high. And what happens is that your body's ability to store fat, it increases, right? Some of you may already know this, right? Every time you and I eat food, it causes our blood sugar to go up. And when your blood sugar goes up, guess what else goes up? Your insulin. See, insulin is the gatekeeper to our cells. It's what allows our cells to open up. And I want you guys to think of a cell as kind of there's receptors on top, right? Think of it like an antenna. And what happens is that the glucose from the foods that we eat will literally attach itself to the receptors, right? Insulin. And what happens is it opens the door and it allows the glucose to enter in. This is the energy that powers your brain, your organs, right? It literally powers everything. But how many of you have ever noticed that when you eat food and certain types of foods, right, your energy goes way up and then you get the energy crash, right? What happens, folks, is when chronically elevated levels of insulin remain high throughout the day. At the end of the day, if this is what's going on inside your body, it's called hypoglycemia, right? Or hyperinsulinemia. Your body is literally swimming in insulin. And I think the majority of the problem today with those that are considered insulin resistant is that the problem is chronically high insulin all day, every day. How many of us were taught to eat 3 meals a day and to snack 2 to 3 times a day? Or how many of us were taught to move more, eat less, right? It keeps your metabolism high. How many of you were given that advice back in the 90s? I was an athlete growing up. But I want you to understand something about insulin. Insulin has 3 main jobs, right? One of the jobs is It lowers blood sugar. And sweet one, I'm talking about what causes insulin resistance, right? Elevated insulin in your body is what drives the chronic diseases and autoimmune issues that we have. One of the biggest problems of insulin resistance is how often we are eating, okay? But insulin has three jobs. One of them is to lower blood sugar. One of them is to store energy as FAT. And the third one is that it prevents the FAT from being burned. Let me make this simpler, okay? Your body has two fuel sources, okay? Your body is either burning food, sugar, right, from the foods that we're eating, and this is how we power our body, or your body is burning your stored energy. We're either storing energy or we are burning energy, but you can't do both at the same time. So if insulin's high all the time, folks, your body is storing FAT. Does that make sense? Let me know if that doesn't make sense, but it should, right? Because the reality is that if our insulin levels are high, inflammation increases, cardiovascular disease increases, all of these things. Davis Lynn, thank you for the follow. Okay. Now, the United States happens to be one of the worst countries when it comes to our metabolic health. And Keith, thank you for the harmony. I appreciate that. Right? The United States happens to be one of the worst countries when it comes to this. But it's worse in the parts of the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Latin America, right? But 93% of people here in the United States are dealing with something called insulin resistance. And it's not getting better. In fact, statistic, things are getting worse. 3 out of 4 Americans are overweight or obese, right? And let me ask you guys this question, because I want participation, right? Do you think that things are getting better health-wise, or do you think things are getting worse? Hey, Miji, thank you for hopping on. It's amazing to think how much we spend on research, how many people are on medications, and yet all of these issues continue to get worse, right? Marianne, Adia, and Bridget, Island Time, Nick, things are getting worse, right? And here's the part that no one wants to tell you, but I'm going to tell you. If I have IBS or migraines or cholesterol issues, and let's just say that I go to 3 different doctors, I'm going to pay 3 different copays, okay? And I'm going to walk out with at least 3 different medications, and not one of those even touches the real root cause of your health issues. So, sweet one, I mean, you have a really good statement, right? Don't you think too much body fat is the root cause of insulin resistance? But the question is what's driving this? What leads to that excess FAT, right? Here's the reality, right? Every time you and I eat food, it doesn't care if it's a Snickers bar or if it's a grape. When we eat something that spikes, especially carbs and especially sugar, it blows up your blood sugar like a roller coaster. And when your blood sugar goes up, your body sees this and it releases a hormone called insulin. Insulin is a fat storing hormone. Okay, when insulin is high, your body is storing energy. When insulin is low, this is when your body is burning your stored energy. Okay, so if we're eating all the time, you are ultimately keeping your insulin high all the time, which means that your body is constantly in storage mode. Okay, this is one of the reasons why we gain the belly fat. This is one of the reasons why our love handles might get bigger. Right? I call insulin the love handle hormone because essentially that's what it's driving. Now, you notice how the Bible tells us that no good tree bears bad fruit. Well, I want you to think of a tree, right? And let me see if I think I have this, but think of a tree in the roots, right? Look at the symptoms that are listed above, right? When you're looking at the symptoms up here, right? That is the fruit on the tree. Insulin resistance happens to be the root. Insulin is what's driving all of these issues. And the crazy part is that far too often what we're doing is we're just throwing medications at each of these individual symptoms, but do they really fix the root cause? And I think you guys can answer that yourself. And Maria, thank you for the follow. So why are we all struggling with this? And I hope that you are thinking about your own health as I talk. Are you dealing with constant fatigue? Are you carrying some extra weight that you can't lose no matter what you try? How many of you have migraines? I had migraine headaches for 23 years. I would get at least 1 to 2 every single week for the last 23 years. How many of you crave food all the time, especially sugar and salty foods, and especially late at night? I'm a foodie. I would imagine some of you are foodies like me, right? But how many of you crave food all the time? How many of you can eat a meal and then 20, 30 minutes later still be hungry? Or the complete opposite to that, how many of you eat and 25 minutes later you're ready for a nap? Now, I love what comeback Keith just mentioned. He said he was a diabetic for 25 years. I want you to understand an important principle when it comes to insulin resistance. I want you to think of it like a fire that is burning out of control in our bodies. Just like how the smoke signals that there is a fire, the symptoms that you and I experience, brain fog, neuropathy, PCOS, erectile dysfunction, that is the smoke to your fire. And we either choose to put the fire out and the smoke goes away, or we just keep sprinkling the water on the smoke and hopefully the fire doesn't burn too far out of control. But when you think about the health issues that we experience, okay, how many of you have skin issues, skin tags, psoriasis, eczema, kidney stones? Okay, all of these are driven by insulin resistance. Now, the big issue here is most doctors aren't talking about insulin resistance. They're not talking about insulin resistance, which happens to be one of the root causes behind a lot of these issues that you and I are having. You know, I used to be a pharmaceutical rep way back in the day, and I just remember, you know, even through my own experience, some of you may know my story, some of you don't. But back in November of 2014, I donated a kidney to my sister's husband. And it was 7 years later when I was told that I had stage 4 kidney disease. And my nephrologist said, Troy, if you don't lose some weight, if you don't change some things in your life, you're going to end up on dialysis or worse. And so, of course, I was given meds like many of you have. And it didn't help me. It didn't help to fix it. It didn't make things better. In my situation, it actually made things worse. And so I've never heard, you know, doctors in my life teach me and help me to understand what insulin resistance was. Now, folks, if you happen to have a doctor that is teaching you and showing you what insulin resistance is, hold on to that doctor as long as you can, because most medical professionals are not talking about it, even though it happens to be one of the leading causes of our health issues. So what I do is I help people to understand, number one, what insulin resistance is, and number two, what it is that you and I can start doing that can help to improve insulin sensitivity. It can help to improve our health, right? So there's two things that I teach people, okay? I talk about time-based eating, going longer periods of time without putting food into your mouth. Charlie, What are you doing? What are you doing, Charlie? So I help people to go longer periods of time without putting food into their mouth. And I'm going to dive into a little bit more on, oh, look at her. So cute. But we're going to dive into this, why fasting is such an important tool in when it comes to our insulin. So that's step one that I teach. Step two is fiber, right? Why fiber is so important. We're the majority of us are getting less than half of what we should be getting. But I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to share a tool. This is exactly why I teach the Feel Great system, right? This is exactly why I teach this. And it's posted linked here, right, in the shop. But whether you are dealing with type 2 diabetes, weight issues, or anything else, okay, I want to help you to understand what you can start doing from the comfort of your own home that can hopefully help you to start improving your health. Okay. So stick around. Let's get into it. If drop your questions in the chat if you have any, and let's talk about what we can do to start getting our health back on track. Now, as I mentioned, and I'll reiterate for those of you that are hopping on, we are talking about insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, what causes it, most importantly, what we can start to do to improve it. But let's talk about insulin. Okay. I think it's important for us to understand insulin's role in our bodies. Okay. Insulin is a hormone. Okay. It is a hormone that acts like a key to open your cells so that our cells can use energy. And so, sorry. So, insulin is a hormone that acts like a key to unlock our cells, and it allows the glucose to enter in where our body will use that for energy. Okay. There's only really two stages of our life, folks, where we actually want to be insulin resistant. And that's puberty and pregnancy, because these are the two stages in our life where it's helping your body to grow. Does that make sense? Okay. But after that, too much insulin in our body becomes a major problem. Okay. And so it's important to understand this. So why is this so important? Okay. And Tony, I love that. Okay. Fadon, good evening or good morning where you're at. Okay. And Tony, I love what you just said, right? That's important. Okay. Right. How, look at our diet here in the US, right? Unfortunately, it is full of ultra processed refined carbs. And so, yes, we should be very mindful about what it is that we are putting in our mouth. And that's part of understanding, number one, what we can start to do to improve our health. In a lot of ways, it's a lot easier said than done. I was having a couple conversations over the last couple of days with some people, and it's interesting that all of the unhealthy foods are very cheap, right? And but you guys notice that when you go to a grocery store, and you've got a little section in there that's considered the health section. You notice that it's kind of interesting that you've got just a very small section of that store is considered healthy. Like, what does that make the rest of the store? And one of the reasons why, and Tony, thank you for that. One of the reasons why I really enjoy talking about fiber is because look at our food industry. Some of you might not know this, but back in the 1970s and 1980s, the food industry started, removing fiber from our foods. And I want you to remember something, right? When the shelf life of your food goes up, because that's what happens when they remove fiber, it increases the shelf life. So when the shelf life of your food goes up, guess what goes down? Your life expectancy and your blood sugar control. Now, why is it important to understand this, right? Because more than half of the United States population has prediabetes or type 2, and chronic conditions like obesity and cardiovascular disease and Autoimmune disorders, they're skyrocketing. But it's not just physical health, folks. How many people do you know are struggling with infertility? What about PCOS, right? It's the leading cause of infertility for women. What about erectile dysfunction? Low testosterone, right? And no, I'm not talking about guys in their 60s. I'm talking about guys in their 20s. I want you guys to think about your own health. Right? If you and I love that, Tony. Thank you. Okay. If you and I went to our family reunion, okay, both sides of the family there, okay, you got your aunts, your uncles, your siblings, your kids, right? How many people at that family reunion are affected by these health issues? How many of them are struggling? How many of you can throw a pebble down the street and come in contact with 10 of your neighbors that might be dealing with some of these health issues? I don't say this lightly. I say it because it is our reality. It is the reality all around us. When we go to a grocery store, when you go to a restaurant, it's all around us, right? Most of the chronic issues that we have today are all linked to what is called insulin resistance. And ladies and gentlemen, what's frustrating is that we are often given medications for each symptom, but does it fix the root cause? I'll let you guys answer that. My goal is to help change that. Fidan, thank you so much for that. And if you're struggling with health issues like kidney disease, or maybe you've been recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or you've lived with it for years, or neuropathy, and maybe you're wondering when all of this is going to end. That's why I do these lives. What I offer is a natural approach that serves as an alternative to what you might already be doing. I encourage you, if you have a doctor, to continue to work with your doctor. But going back to infertility, right? This is something that, I struggled with when I, was married, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But infertility is a growing concern around the world. It's increasing by 1% each year in the United States, right? More younger women and men are facing these issues. And so aging does not have to mean a slowing metabolism. So what I do is, and I've been doing this myself, right? I don't just teach this, I live it, I do this. But when I wake up first thing in the morning, I sip on a chlorogenic acid tea. Chlorogenic acid is amazing, right? Chlorogenic acid is a novel insulin sensitizer. It's what helps to lower your insulin naturally. And so what I do is, some of you might have been wondering, what is it that I'm sipping on, right? This is why I teach the Feel Great system. Now, it's called the Feel Great system because when you take it, it helps you feel great. How many of you have ever heard of GLP-1? Okay, how many of you ever heard that, right? There's a lot of Crave, a lot of commercials that might be talking about this, but how many of you have ever heard of that? If you wouldn't mind, type that in the chat. How many of you, right? How many of you are diabetic? And if you are, would you mind sharing, if you're comfortable with it, what you are taking? We're all in this together, right? And I want people to understand that you're not alone, right? If you're struggling with these health issues, there's a lot of people around us that are probably experiencing and dealing with this as well. Now, I donated a kidney, right, to my sister's husband back in November of 2014. And it was 7 years later when I was told that I had stage 4 kidney disease. And my nephrologist said, Troy, okay, if you don't make some changes, there's a chance that you could end up on dialysis. This freaked me out. It scared me because I've always been healthy, right? I've never really dealt with any major illness. And so when I was being told this, it was an eye opener for me. It was my wake up call. And I'm so grateful for what I know now, right? It was 2.5 years later when I was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney disease that I learned about a simple system, a simple tool that I talk about, right? And the link's right here in the TikTok shop. But this is why I teach this and talk about it, because it can be an effective tool in what you're doing. Okay. So in the United States, we're seeing rising rates of all of these things: obesity, diabetes. You guys realize that 54% of our country has it. 74% of American adults is overweight or obese. More than 50% of our kids are dealing with the same thing. What's interesting is last year, kind of a part-time thing, I thought it would be fun to be a bus driver. And I don't know about you that do that, but I'll never do that again. I had some amazing elementary kids, but I had some junior high students. But it amazed me at how many of those students that were getting on the school bus visibly were struggling with their health. It almost seems that everyone is affected by these issues. So let's talk about the solutions. And Comeback Keith says that he was on 15 meds a day and 6 injections. I can't even imagine that. That's crazy. Okay. So let's talk about the solutions. Let's talk about, folks, what we can start to do to improve insulin sensitivity in our bodies and improve our health. Okay. Because the first step is understanding your symptoms and connecting them to the root cause. And once you do that, folks, we can start finding real solutions. Now, if any of these resonates with you, I want you to type a 1 in the chat. When you're looking at this box up here, okay, and if you can't see the symptoms, I'm going to name off a few of them, right? And if these resonate with you, please just indicate with the number 1 in the chat. But skin issues, adult acne, psoriasis, skin tags, the dark spots, the dark patches of skin that won't wash off, right? How many of you have some stubborn excess belly fat, right? The weight. Okay, how many of you feel like everything you do, you just can't seem to get that to budge? What about high blood pressure and high cholesterol? Did you know that those are linked to insulin resistance too? Guess what your doctor is likely to do, though? Put you on medications. Rarely do they ever talk about fixing the root cause so that your blood pressure and your cholesterol can normalize naturally. Now, how many of you have migraines or headaches? I used to have them for 23 years. I'd have no less than at least one a week. What about inflammation, right? If you have something that ends in itis, right? Bursitis, colitis, plantar fasciitis, anything, arthritis, right? Rheumatoid arthritis, all of these things are caused by inflammation. Even autoimmune conditions are driven by inflammation in the body. Inflammation happens to be one of the root causes of insulin resistance, right? Hopefully this is all starting to connect and make sense. Okay. How many of you have hypoglycemia? Low blood sugar, right? You need to eat constantly, right? Here's another symptom. Or suffering from, heart disease. A lot of these could be related to insulin resistance. How many of you have ever heard of type 3 diabetes? Ever heard of it? Too much sugar in the brain of a child can lead to ADHD. Too much sugar in the brain of an adult can lead to Alzheimer's and dementia. Folks, If that runs in your family, pay attention to that one, because that is one thing I would never wish upon anyone. And here's the scariest part about insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes in general. What's scary is that it can take 10 to 20 years before that fire has burned out of control enough to where it leads to a diabetes diagnosis. So that fire's been burning for a long time. You weren't just told that you had type 2 diabetes, right? You've been dealing with this for a long time. You just didn't know it. The great news about all of this is that we can start to take action to prevent it and improve insulin sensitivity. Now, I love the analogy of a fire burning out of control in our bodies, right? The smoke is the symptoms, okay? And you take your fire hose and you either spray the smoke and the fire keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, or we direct that fire hose right at the source of the fire. Might take some effort, but that fire is going to be put out. So how do we manage the excess insulin in our bodies, ladies and gentlemen? A major contributor is our habit of eating constantly throughout the day. How many of us were taught to eat these three meals a day and to snack 2 to 3 times throughout the day, right? It's become ingrained in our routine. But the reality is, very few people that you and I know are in perfect health. Now, while we might be living longer, it's not just about longevity. It's about how good we feel as we age. See, your body is capable of healing itself, but if we don't start making changes now, your health really could derail down the line. Let me ask you a quick question, and I've only got maybe 10, 15 more minutes. So I'm going to hop off, but what is the most important meal of your day? If you wouldn't mind, drop that in the chat. What's the most important meal of your day? I'm always curious. Okay. Like many of you, I was told that breakfast was the most important meal of the day. The first meal of your day, right? Break fast. That's what that means. But here's the truth. Whatever you eat first is technically your breakfast, your breakfast, whether that's at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night. The key is what you eat when you break your fast, because that first meal of the day sets the tone for everything else. Now, maybe breakfast was just a marketing tactic. Maybe that was to sell us more cereal and bagels, right? You guys be the judge of that. I think you guys are pretty smart, okay? And Samaya, let me know if you have any questions, okay? But folks, right? Think about our ancestors. Break your fast meant something entirely different to our ancestors. They didn't have 3 meals a day, right? They hunted and that way they had food for several days. They planted crops. They didn't have the convenience that we have today, right? If I'm hungry, I can get in my car and I can go through a drive-through somewhere, right? But I want you to understand something when it comes to our bodies. Your body runs better, actually, when we wait a little bit to eat. Now, why? Because when you go about 8 hours without food, what happens is that your body starts to burn through your stored sugar, and now it starts tapping into the FAT, right? The stored energy that you have. And Rudolph, thank you for being on. Thank you for your comments, right? Your body has 2 fuel sources. Remember that. We are either storing energy or we are burning energy. How many of you would like to burn more energy? in the excess of FAT, right? How many of you would love to start improving and maybe getting rid of that excess belly, the protruding belly, the love handles, right? And by the way, folks, if breakfast is your favorite meal, that's fine. It's mine too. I love breakfast. But consider eating it at lunchtime or dinner. And instead, try to go longer periods of time without taking any food in. When you go for extended periods of time without eating, your blood sugar doesn't spike. Eating food causes your blood sugar to rise, right? Which triggers insulin to move this glucose into your cells for energy. But when your cells become resistant to insulin, your cells refuse to open up and actually access the excess glucose. So what happens is this leads to excess glucose being stored in places like your liver. So it contributes to what is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Okay. Inflammation, diabetes. I think this is hopefully making sense, right? Now, folks, the reason why I get on here and talk about this, you would be surprised at how many people every single day that I talk to that are affected by these issues. What blows me even more is how many of these people are on prescriptions for this. How many of you feel like the medications you're on are helping you to manage your symptoms? Folks, I believe that it is so important to understand why we have these health issues and, more importantly, what we can do about them. So I'm going to share 2 things that you can do that can help you to start reversing insulin resistance naturally. There's no, right? Fasting and fiber. Fiber is something that we need, that we're not getting enough of. This is exactly why I teach this and why I have a direct link for you to get this if you want to try this. By the way, it does come with a 90-day money-back guarantee. So if you try it and you're unhappy with it, just get your money back. This is how it works. When I wake up first thing in the morning, is I'm going to mix this with about 20 to 30 ounces of water. And I just sip on it. And it shuts the food noise off. And it helps to decrease the cravings for sugar and carbs. And it allows you, if you're trying to fast, it allows you to actually go longer periods of time without fasting. Okay. The second tea you're going to have right after lunch. So you're going to eat your meals as normal, right? There's no specific diet and things that you have to follow, right? Just eat lunch as normal. And then right after lunch, you're going to sip on your second chlorogenic acid tea. What that does is it helps to eliminate the cravings for sugar and for salt and for snacks later on. How many of you love the snack, especially in the afternoon? You've had lunch, you come back to the office, or maybe you're working from home and you get a little hungry in the afternoon, so we snack, right? Well, this helps to kind of just shut that off. Okay? It allows your body to start healing from the inside. Okay? And then before the biggest meal of the day, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to mix this blend of 7 soluble and insoluble fibers. You're going to mix it with water and you're just going to chug it. Okay? And it acts like a protective coat. It's kind of like a superhero protecting you. When I drink this fiber, it literally lines the gut and it becomes this thick, viscous gel. Okay? And what it does is it helps to surround the food and it slows the digestion down, slows the absorption of the sugar and the carbs. Okay? So for some of you that might have elevated blood sugar all the time, this is a great way to normalize that. Okay? The reason why I share this is because we're seeing a rising rate in childhood obesity and osteoarthritis, dementia, migraines, infertility like PCOS, erectile dysfunction, fatty liver disease. Okay. Did you guys know that before 1980, fatty liver was only seen in alcoholics? And now 25% of our kids in the United States have it. And even 3-year-olds are being diagnosed with what is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I could talk about sleep apnea. I could talk about acid reflux. I used to have that. I don't anymore. We could talk about blood pressure and cholesterol. But the reality is, far too often we are just throwing meds at our symptoms, but they don't actually help improve insulin sensitivity. Folks, if you are looking for a way to improve your health, this is why I teach this. If what I share with you has resonated with you, if it sounds like what you've been praying for, and maybe you're looking for this, what I would encourage each and every one of you that might be struggling with your health, and maybe you've tried everything up to this point. Maybe you're wondering, well, how is this going to work, right? It comes with a 90-day, no questions asked, money back guarantee. When you get your insulin under control, everything starts to change. The truth is, for the majority of us that are affected by these health issues, is we have too much insulin in our bodies and our cells become resistant to it. So in order for us to get control of insulin again, there's 2 key ways that I teach: fasting and fiber. And if we can incorporate those 2 things, folks, over the next 90 days, you might be unrecognizable. So insulin resistance is one of those things that we're going to be talking about for years to come because it affects the majority of us. Is there any question on what I've shared up to this point? I just want to make sure that, right, if you guys have questions, I just want to make sure that, I've been able to answer that for you. Okay. Heart disease and the dreadful C word continue to remain the 2 leading causes of death worldwide. And yet most people don't realize that insulin resistance is the driver of this. Folks, I love what this has done for my life. I love that when I went back to my nephrologist after being on this for 5 months, my kidney doctor is like, Troy, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. I loved hearing that from my doctor. Because when my doctor diagnosed me with stage 4 kidney disease, like, that scared me. We can improve our health. Our body has the ability to repair itself. Our body is pretty amazing, right? God knew what he was doing when he created us. And I want you guys to think of insulin resistance as a spectrum, okay? Everyone exists along this continuum from insulin sensitivity to insulin resistance, with type 2 diabetes marking the extreme end. Folks, your risk of severe health condition is determined by where you fall on this line. The more insulin resistant you are, the higher your risk is for cardiovascular disease, for dementia, for high blood sugar, high blood pressure. See, it doesn't just increase your risk for these conditions, it also shortens your lifespan. And testing for it's actually pretty simple. The most precise method is measuring your fasting insulin levels, okay? But doctors typically don't test this. They don't test inflammation either. We don't test for 2 key drivers of disease in humans: chronic inflammation and insulin resistance. It's time that we change this. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, understanding where you are on this insulin resistance spectrum can be life-changing. So it's time that we shed light on this silent yet powerful driver of chronic disease and take proactive steps towards better health. The question is, are you ready to take action? And if you are, folks, I would love to work with you. Each and every one of you who orders using, right, my LINK, right? It's right here in the shop. When you use it, I become your personal coach. Okay. I'm going to make sure that you understand how to use it because I want to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. I want to make sure that over the next 90 days, you have a solid plan on what you need to do to improve your health. And the best part about this is that within 30 days or 90 days, if you have noticed absolutely zero change, there's no risk. Just get your money back. Folks, I'm so grateful that I get the opportunity to share this with people. The impact, okay, has been an absolutely amazing transformation for people. Okay. What I love is that this helps to tackle the root cause of insulin resistance. Medications treat the symptoms, they don't fix the root cause. And if you have a desire to move the needle, like for real, fasting and fiber and having the right tools. Okay. And if you need the right tools, I've just shared that with you. Okay. Folks, I'm so grateful for each and every one of you for hopping on this live. I love talking about this more than that. I love helping people. I made a promise to my Heavenly Father that I would get on here every single day and in some way share this with people that could hopefully make an impact and help people to understand, number one, what's causing these issues. That's what this is all about. This is why I love sharing about it. This is why I love talking about it. But I don't just talk about it. I live it. I do this. You will not see me go anywhere without this bottle. It's like my binky. I can't go anywhere without it. Within a month and a half, lost weight. I had migraines that went away in the first week, which blew me away. If any of you have ever had migraines, they're frustrating, right? You could be on the most comfortable bed, most comfortable pillow, and it's pitch dark, and your head is still pounding, right? It hurts. And this is why I love my energy levels are through the roof. I feel like I'm in my 20s and I'm 47 years old. Folks, I'm going to get on tomorrow morning and share a little bit more about this. But I hope and pray that what I've shared with you is giving you a little synopsis on what insulin resistance is. And if there's anything that I can do to help you, okay, that's what I'm here for. Okay. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Is there any questions on how to use it? Is there interest in, and by the way, feel free to, if you are serious about resetting, fixing the root cause, send me a message and put reset or type tools, okay, right here. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being on this live tonight. I hope that you guys have an amazing rest of your week. God bless you. I will stay on for just